What if I told you that you were sold a lie? That the opposite of anger is peace? The real opposite of anger is apathy, a systemic, heavy shutdown where your brain collapses under the weight of a frustration it can no longer afford to process. In today's episode, we're diving into a single blog post by artist and polymath, Jeremy Brunansky. This isn't just a conversation about calming down. This is about metabolic clearance, recognizing the heavy wool blanket of a complex before it alters your vision. By the end of today's episode, you'll be able to identify and treat your own personal triggers. If you've ever wondered if you're actually a peaceful person or just a heavily fortified one, this episode is for you. Grab your coffee, tea, or wine. It's time for the sidebar.
So, most people just assume that the opposite of anger is, this state of profound Zen-like peace.
Right, like you're just totally enlightened or something.
Exactly. But if you actually look at the neurobiology of it, that is just completely false.
Oh, completely.
Yeah. Like if you look at brain imaging of chronic emotional states, the actual opposite of anger isn't peace at all. It's apathy.
Wow. Yeah, apathy.
Right. And apathy isn't just an absence of emotion. It's actually this incredibly dense, heavy emotional state that happens when the brain basically just collapses under the weight of unresolved frustration.
It really does. It's a systemic shutdown, basically.
I mean, it takes massive amounts of cognitive energy to actively not care about something that's hurting you.
Yeah, your prefrontal cortex is essentially like forcefully muting the amygdala at that point.
Muting it.
Exactly. Because the cost of processing that continuous frustration is just, it's too metabolically expensive for the body.
Oh, I see. So apathy is basically the ultimate defense mechanism of a totally exhausted mind.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Which, brings a completely different context to the material we're dissecting today.
It really does. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are looking at this deeply personal, just really raw, lived experience of anger.
Yeah, it's a fascinating piece.
It's an essay from December 2020. It's by Jeremy Brunansky, and it's called Anger or Constipation. It's 2020, probably anger.
The title alone is just great.
Right. It's so good. And, think about the cultural and psychological environment of December 2020.
Oh, man. Just a wildly stressful time for literally everyone.
Exactly. And the author is sitting at his keyboard, and he's got classical Christmas music playing softly in the background.
Which is such a funny image.
It is. It's this quintessential, artificially soothing holiday ambiance. And while that's playing, he is writing this surgical breakdown of human rage.
It's quite the contrast.
Yeah. And so what we're doing today is we're using his essay to extract actual practical tools for identifying triggers.
Right. We're getting into the mechanics of it.
Exactly. Specifically, we're going to really lean into this framework he builds around treating anger as a removable object.
The blanket metaphor.
Yes, the blanket metaphor, which we will get to, and it is brilliant. But I want to talk about that tone first.
The juxtaposition of the Christmas music and the rage.
Yeah. It's like the perfect microcosm for the modern human condition, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we build these incredibly curated, comfortable environments for ourselves.
Like smart thermostats and stuff?
Yeah, smart thermostats, noise-canceling headphones,
right.
Specialized holiday playlists.
Right.
And yet, despite all of that, our internal neurochemistry is still just wildly volatile.
It's like we're desperately trying to overlay this soothing soundtrack onto a deeply chaotic internal landscape.
That is exactly it. We're trying to out-comfort our own biology.
And the author hits on this right away by targeting that exact illusion of not feeling anything.
Right, the apathy thing we mentioned.
Yeah. He argues that emotions never actually go away. Like, even when you hit that state of emotional numbness, you are still actively participating in the emotional spectrum.
You're just participating in a really heavy, exhausted way.
Exactly. But then he makes this fascinating claim about his own psychology right after that.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
He states, quite definitively, that he is not naturally an angry or aggressive person.
Right.
He says his baseline, his default operating state, is positive, casual, and non-contrary.
Which is really interesting. When you evaluate an emotional baseline like that, you kind of have to look at the data set the person is operating from.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when someone who naturally runs hot experiences rage, the transition is seamless, right?
Oh, like if they're already an angry person.
Exactly. Anger is just their familiar territory. In psychology, we call that egosyntonic.
Egosyntonic, meaning it aligns with their ego.
Right. It aligns with how they already view themselves and the world.
Okay, that makes sense.
But for someone whose default state is genuinely positive and casual, a sudden spike of rage is ego-dystonic.
It feels completely alien to them.
Exactly. It creates this state of cognitive dissonance, which actually forces them to step back and examine the emotion as an external thing.
Because it's not who they are.
Right. Instead of just blindly acting it out, it gives them this psychological distance. They become an observer in their own mind.
Okay, so I read his self-assessment, and I have to be honest, my immediate instinct was a little bit of skepticism.
Really? Why is that?
Well, I just have to wonder, is his baseline genuinely positive and casual? Or has he just successfully engineered a life where he aggressively avoids conflict?
Oh, that's a really fair point.
Because, think about it. For you listening right now, think about your own emotional baseline. Do you generally run cold or do you run hot?
A lot of people think they run cold.
Right. A lot of people claim their baseline is just chill, but in reality, they're just highly conflict avoidant.
They've just built a fortress so nobody can bother them.
Exactly. And the moment true friction is introduced, that whole chill facade just shatters. It's like a computer operating system.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, like anger might not be your default OS, but when a specific program, a trigger, runs, it can just hijack the whole system.
That is the eternal question in clinical psychology, honestly. Are you actually peaceful or are you just heavily fortified?
Right. Are you a monk or are you just hiding in a bunker?
Exactly. But assuming his self-reporting is accurate here, this alien experience of anger allows him to categorize the onset of the emotion in a really cool way.
He breaks it down into two distinct structures, right?
Yes. He talks about the obtrusive catalyst versus the subtle yet invasive trigger.
The distinction between those two is so critical.
It really is.
Because an obtrusive catalyst is just a systemic shock. It's the car swerving into your lane on the highway.
Right, it's immediate.
Yeah, your sympathetic nervous system just floods your body with adrenaline before your conscious mind even registers what happened.
You don't even have to think about it.
You don't have to search for the reason you're angry. The catalyst is literally screaming in your face.
Exactly. The obtrusive catalyst demands an immediate physical response to survive.
But the subtle trigger is totally different.
Entirely different. The subtle yet invasive trigger operates on a completely different neural pathway.
Because it's not a physical threat.
Right. It doesn't rely on immediate danger. It relies on prolonged psychological context.
I look at it like tectonic plates versus a localized explosion.
Oh, tectonic plates. Walk me through that.
Well, an obtrusive catalyst is like a stick of dynamite going off in your living room.
Loud, obvious damage.
Right. It's loud. The cause is obvious. You know exactly what happened. But the subtle trigger is tectonic.
Ah, I see.
It's a passing comment from a family member about your career trajectory.
Oh, those are the worst.
Right. Or it's the specific, slightly condescending tone your manager uses during a performance review.
Just a slight shift in tone.
Exactly. And on the surface, the ground barely moves. It's just a micro tremor.
But beneath the surface...
Beneath the surface, that specific comment is grinding against deep, pre-existing fault lines. Insecurity, identity, past trauma.
Building up pressure.
Yes. The friction builds completely out of sight until, like weeks later, an entirely unrelated minor annoyance causes a massive psychological earthquake.
And that is the danger of tectonic friction, you know? You rarely attribute the eventual earthquake to the subtle trigger.
Never. You blame the minor annoyance.
Right. You think you're furious because the coffee machine is broken.
When really it's because of what your boss said on Tuesday.
Exactly. You completely ignore the fact that the subtle trigger has been silently hijacking your cognitive bandwidth for days.
So if anger isn't his default, how does he try to keep it out of the operating system?
Well, historically, humanity's primary defense mechanism against this kind of cognitive hijacking has been philosophy.
Right. Specifically Stoicism.
Yeah, the author gets really fascinated by this. He draws a parallel between Stoic philosophers and Star Wars Jedi Knights.
Which is such a fun comparison.
It is, because the Jedi are conditioned from infancy, right? They're trained to detach themselves from emotional outcomes.
It's a whole lifestyle, not just a belief system.
Exactly. And he uses the Jedi as this pop culture anchor, but he grounds it in actual Stoic literature from his reference guide.
Oh, right. He gets into Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Socrates.
Yeah, Aristotle too. But we really have to clarify what Stoicism actually is mechanically here.
Because people get it so wrong.
Chronically misunderstood in modern discourse. People just think it means suppressing emotion.
Right. The modern colloquial definition of a Stoic is basically just a guy who doesn't cry at funerals and refuses to go to therapy.
Which is just a catastrophic misreading of the philosophy.
Totally. So what was it actually?
Ancient Stoicism was rooted in a cognitive mechanism called prohairesis.
Prohairesis, okay.
Which roughly translates to the capacity for conscious choice.
Got it.
The Stoics didn't argue that you shouldn't feel the initial physiological flush of anger when someone insults you. They weren't robots.
They still felt the heart rate spike.
Yes. They called those initial involuntary emotional reactions propatheiai, which basically means pre-emotions.
Pre-emotions. Okay, so the biology still happens.
Right. The actual discipline of Stoicism was creating a cognitive gap between that pre-emotion and the subsequent judgment about it.
Oh, wow. Okay, meaning the insult happens, your heart rate spikes, but in that millisecond, your prohairesis steps in.
Exactly. It steps in and says, this insult only harms me if I agree with the judgment that this person's opinion matters.
That is incredibly difficult to do.
It's wildly difficult. They were actively rewiring their cognitive pathways to strip external events of their inherent value.
But as the author points out, that level of cognitive restructuring is a lifetime commitment.
It's an all-encompassing lifestyle. It requires immense, relentless metacognition.
Which leads to his realization, which I love. He just says, I am not a Stoic.
It's very honest.
It is. He comes to terms with the fact that without that lifetime of conditioning like a Jedi, human beings are inevitably going to experience the full weight of emotional volatility.
We're going to fail to maintain that cognitive gap.
Right. But failing to be perfectly Stoic doesn't make us failures. It just makes us, like he says, just folks trying to make our lives work.
I love that. And the failure to maintain that gap doesn't indicate a moral failing, right? It indicates biological functioning.
Because we're built to react.
Exactly. Our brains evolved to react to threats, not to sit around philosophizing about them.
So when he admits he isn't a Stoic, he's shedding the guilt of biological reality?
Yes. He's saying, I am a biological organism and I am going to react.
I think about this emotional acclimatization like deep sea diving.
Oh, okay. Let's hear it.
Well, Stoics are like saturation divers. They have spent years slowly conditioning their physiology to withstand immense atmospheric pressure.
So their lungs don't collapse.
Right. If you or I, as regular people, just get dropped into that exact same depth without the years of rigorous training, we don't just, fail to be a diver.
No, we get crushed by the pressure.
We literally get crushed. So the author is acknowledging that he is swimming at the surface. And when a wave of anger pulls him under, he is going to feel the pressure in his chest.
That's a great analogy. And acknowledging that reality forces a pivot in the strategy.
Right, because we're going to feel it.
Exactly. If we accept that we can't philosophize our way out of the initial biological reaction, we have to understand what that biological reaction is physically demanding of us.
Which leads right into the anatomy of it.
Yeah.
The author turns to a dictionary definition to anchor this.
What's the definition he uses?
He says, anger is a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility.
Very clinical.
Right. But then he counters that sterile definition with a famous observation from Aristotle.
Oh, the Aristotle quote. That's a good one.
Yeah, Aristotle stated that anybody can become angry. That's easy.
Mm-hmm.
But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is incredibly difficult.
It really is. Aristotle's basically mapping out the functional parameters of targeted aggression there.
And it's so biologically difficult to achieve that precision.
Well, let's look at why that is. When you experience anger, your hypothalamus signals your pituitary gland, right?
Okay, following.
Which in turn signals your adrenal glands to release this massive surge of cortisol and adrenaline.
And the author notes this physically makes us, in his words, mighty well mad.
Mighty well mad, yes. But crucially, during this whole process, the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, effectively overrides the prefrontal cortex.
And the prefrontal cortex is the exact area of the brain responsible for context, logic, social appropriateness, and degree.
Yes. The brain just shuts down the very hardware required to calculate Aristotle's right degree and right time.
Because doing math during a bear attack is a bad idea.
Exactly. From an evolutionary standpoint, calculating nuance during a physical threat is a fatal delay.
Wow. So the biological mechanism of anger is just inherently hostile to the philosophical precision Aristotle is demanding.
It's a complete evolutionary mismatch.
That is so fascinating. So the author's practical advice for dealing with this adrenaline dump, this mighty while mad feeling, is highly physical.
Right. He suggests hitting the gym.
Yeah, hitting the gym. Or, he says, if you live somewhere snowy, going outside and chopping firewood.
Chopping wood is great.
Now, I actually want to push back on this a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Because there is a lot of pop psychology out there, like the whole catharsis theory that started with Freud, that suggests you need to vent anger.
Ah, right. The punching a pillow thing.
Exactly. You punch a pillow, you scream in your car.
Yeah.
But recent neuropsychological studies show that venting often just reinforces the neural pathways for aggression.
Yes, it definitely does.
Right. If you punch a pillow every time you get mad, your brain just learns to associate frustration with striking an object. So my question is chopping wood actually helping, or is it just training the brain for violence?
That is a really crucial distinction to make, because catharsis theory, in that Freudian sense of letting off steam by visualizing your anger while hitting something, has largely been debunked.
Right, it doesn't work.
It doesn't. Rumination combined with physical aggression does indeed reinforce hostility.
So then what is the author doing with the wood?
What the author is suggesting with chopping wood or hitting the gym is not necessarily psychological rumination, it is metabolic clearance.
Metabolic clearance. Explain the difference for us.
Well, when that adrenaline and cortisol dump into your bloodstream, your physiological state is severely altered.
Right. Heart rate goes up.
Your heart rate variability drops, your blood pressure spikes, and glucose is dumped into your muscles.
You're ready to fight or run.
Exactly. Your body is biologically demanding physical exertion to complete the stress cycle.
So if you don't do anything.
If you just sit still at your desk and stew in that neurochemical soup, that toxicity lingers and causes systemic damage to your body.
Oh, wow. So chopping wood isn't about, like, visualizing your enemy's face on the log.
No, not at all. It's about providing the heavy physical resistance your sympathetic nervous system actually requires to burn off the catecholamines.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
Once the physical energy is spent, then the parasympathetic nervous system can engage.
Which brings you back down.
Right, bringing your heart rate down and allowing the prefrontal cortex to come back online.
So the physical exertion is basically a reboot sequence for the prefrontal cortex.
Yes, beautifully put.
You aren't punishing the wood. You are just using the wood to metabolize the chemicals.
Exactly. You're utilizing the mechanical realities of the body to clear the fog out of the brain.
But, to utilize that technique, you have to be deeply aware of when the fog is actually rolling in.
Right. You can't metabolize a chemical spike you don't realize is happening.
Which brings us to the author's incredibly vulnerable, deeply personal audit of his own triggers.
This part of the essay is so brave, honestly.
It really is. He lays out his tectonic plates for the reader. He talks about nearly 4 years of unemployment and underemployment.
That is a massive stressor.
Yeah, and he details the humiliation of having to borrow money from his parents to survive the job hunt.
Oof.
He discusses the traumatic poisoning and death of his dog, Austin.
Which is just heartbreaking.
It is. He also mentions this bizarre, uncomfortable dynamic with a church Bible study and just the general strangeness of his life where he feels like he can't get straightforward, honest answers from people.
When you analyze that specific matrix of triggers, a really clear psychological profile emerges.
Yeah. What do you see?
Well, none of these are mere inconveniences, right? They are profound threats to identity and agency.
Agency is the key word there, I think.
Exactly. Unemployment isn't just a lack of income. In our society, it is an erosion of perceived utility and status.
We feel useless.
Right. And having to borrow money from parents as an adult forces a regression to a childlike state of dependency.
So it's all about loss of agency. That unifies all of them.
Yes, completely.
You can't force a company to hire you. You can't undo the malicious poisoning of a pet. You can't mandate that other people communicate with you transparently.
You're just stuck.
He's caught in this web of circumstances where his ability to affect the outcome has been completely stripped away.
And that's where the anger comes from.
Right. The anger isn't just about the events themselves. The anger is the brain's desperate attempt to reclaim a feeling of power in a situation where he is totally powerless.
Exactly. The brain uses anger as a shield against the vulnerability of powerlessness.
But his ability to dissect these triggers so openly requires a very unique internal environment, doesn't it?
It does. He shares an anecdote about a conversation with a therapist during this period that really highlights this.
Right. They're discussing how the brain stores subconscious memory.
Yeah, and the therapist explicitly confirms that he does not believe the author is depressed or suicidal.
And the author's internal monologue regarding that diagnosis is startlingly confident.
It is. It's so refreshing.
He fundamentally agrees. He notes that it's ridiculous to think he would hurt himself because he loves himself too much.
Right.
He says he wouldn't hurt the people he cares about, so why would he hurt the person he cares about most, himself?
That degree of unshakable self-worth acts as a psychological clean room.
A clean room? How so?
Well, in clinical terms, exploring your own triggers, your deep-seated resentments, and your grief, what Jungian analysts would call shadow work, is incredibly dangerous if you have a fragile ego structure.
Oh, because it could break you.
Exactly. If you suffer from low self-esteem, examining your own anger can easily spiral into crippling shame or self-destructive depression.
You just turn the hostility inward.
Because you view the anger as proof that you are fundamentally broken.
Right. But because the author possesses this immense reservoir of self-love, he has a secure base.
The tether.
Yeah. He can walk into the darkest corners of his own psyche, examine his rage over the loss of his dog, and evaluate his humiliation regarding his career without fearing that the exploration will destroy him.
The self-love is the tether that allows him to objectively study the anger without being consumed by it.
He trusts his own foundational architecture enough to just let the storm rage outside.
That's a great way to put it.
And he notices that when a conversation lingers too long on these specific, powerless topics, his body reacts.
The somatic markers.
Yes. And this is the utility of tracking triggers.
Yeah.
I want to ask you listening, look at how specific the author's triggers are. It's not just, I hate traffic.
All right, it's highly specific.
It's the prolonged indignity of unemployment combined with the acute grief of a poisoned pet. So what are the specific conversational triggers that make your blood pressure spike?
You really have to identify your specific somatic markers. Like when the topic of your career comes up, does your jaw clench?
Does your breathing get shallow?
Exactly. The body registers the threat of the trigger long before the conscious mind formulates a coherent thought about it.
And recognizing that somatic marker is the prerequisite for employing the absolute best cognitive tool the author presents in this whole piece.
Here we go.
The climax of his framework. When a conversational trigger is hit, he describes the sensation of anger covering him like a blanket.
The anger as a blanket metaphor is the absolute anchor of this entire piece.
It's so brilliant. Let's dissect why this specific visual is so effective for cognitive regulation.
Well, in behavioral psychology, specifically acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, there is a concept called cognitive diffusion.
Diffusion with a D.
Right. When we experience intense emotion, our language usually reflects cognitive fusion. Like we say, I am angry, I am depressed.
We fuse our core identity with the transient emotional state.
Precisely. The blanket metaphor is a masterclass in cognitive diffusion.
Because a blanket isn't you.
Exactly. A blanket is a physical object that exists entirely outside of your cellular structure. When a blanket is placed on you, you do not become the blanket.
You are simply a human being currently residing underneath a heavy textile.
It externalizes the pathology.
Right. If anger is a disease in my blood, I am terrified because I require complex medical intervention to survive.
But if anger is just a heavy wool blanket dropped on my shoulders,
I am not diseased. I am just temporarily encumbered.
it provides an immediate tactile sense of relief because it reframes an overwhelming psychological crisis into a simple mechanical problem.
And the physical properties of the blanket also perfectly mirror the physiological experience of the emotion.
Right, absolutely. Think about it. A heavy blanket restricts your movement. It alters how you interact with your environment.
It could be suffocating and claustrophobic.
And anger does exactly the same thing to your cognitive flexibility. It gives you tunnel vision.
But the defining characteristic of a blanket, crucially, is that it is removable.
Yes, you don't need a scalpel to remove a blanket. You just need to shrug your shoulders and push it onto the floor.
And the author provides his own specific mechanical processes for shrugging off that blanket.
What are his techniques?
He lists hitting the gym, taking an actual hike to a summit with a view, praying, meditating, or focusing on a creative endeavor.
I want to look at the hike to a summit technique for a second.
Yeah, let's look at that.
Because it's not just about the physical exertion we discussed earlier. Getting to a higher elevation and physically looking down at the world provides literal spatial perspective.
Oh, that makes sense. The blanket creates claustrophobia, but the summit creates vastness.
Exactly. You are using the physical environment to force your brain out of its narrow, threat-focused tunnel vision.
He is deliberately altering his sensory input to break the cognitive loop.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he includes this brilliant piece of meta-awareness right in the middle of this framework.
The disclaimer. I love this part.
Yeah. He acknowledges that the mere act of reading a blog post about anger, unemployment, and dead dogs might be acting as a trigger for the reader.
Like the text itself might be dropping a blanket onto the reader's shoulders.
It's a great psychological disclaimer. He's basically saying, notice your body right now. Did reading about my frustration trigger your own?
But the underlying message of the blanket metaphor is profound self-compassion.
It really is.
If a blanket falls on you, it isn't a moral failing. You don't beat yourself up for being under the blanket.
You simply acknowledge the weight, recognize the restriction, and begin the mechanical work of taking it off.
Taking it off is a daily practice. But, what happens if we fail to remove it?
Well, that's where it gets dangerous. The critical danger lies in what happens when we refuse to acknowledge the blanket.
Or when we become so accustomed to the weight that we forget we're wearing it at all.
Exactly. Which moves us from the temporary experience of emotion into the realm of chronic psychological pathology.
Getting trapped by our own complexes.
Yeah.
The author brings in Carl Jung to drive this point home, and he uses this great quote.
Oh, the Jung quote is perfect.
He quotes Jung saying, "Everyone knows nowadays that people have complexes. What is not so well known, though far more important theoretically, is that complexes can have us."
To really understand the weight of that quote, we need to clearly define what Carl Jung meant by a complex.
Yeah, please break that down.
In Jungian psychology, a complex is not just a casual insecurity. It is a dense, emotionally charged constellation of ideas, memories, and images residing in the unconscious mind.
Okay, so it's deep in there.
Very deep. Jung discovered them through word association tests. He noticed that when a patient hit a specific trigger word, their reaction time would spike, they would sweat, and they would lose their train of thought.
The subconscious tectonic plate was struck.
Exactly. The complex acts almost like an autonomous subpersonality within the psyche.
Like it has a mind of its own.
It really does. It has its own desires, its own fears, and its own defensive mechanisms. When you have a complex, you possess this sensitive area in your unconscious.
But when a complex has you,
it means the trigger has been activated so severely or ignored for so long that this autonomous subpersonality has literally seized control of your conscious ego.
this is when people act entirely out of character.
Yes.
Like when people say things like, "I don't know what came over me, I wasn't myself."
They literally were not themselves. The complex was driving the car.
Tying this back to the author's metaphor, having a complex is walking around with a heavy blanket draped over your head.
Right.
But the complex having you is when you have worn the blanket over your head for so long that you genuinely believe the entire world is made of dark wool.
Wow. Yes. Your perception of reality is entirely dictated by the fabric of your unresolved trauma.
You interact with your spouse, your boss, and your children through the restrictive, suffocating filter of your triggers.
The central battle of human emotional health is recognizing the blanket before it alters your vision like that.
But I love that the author doesn't end on this intense clinical note.
He really softens it at the end.
He does. He offers this incredibly grounded, forgiving grace to the reader. He says quite simply, you might succeed one day and fail the next. It happens to me, it happens to you, it happens.
That is the ultimate antidote to the toxic perfectionism that pervades modern self-help culture, isn't it?
It really is. We're constantly sold this idea of permanent emotional optimization.
The idea that if you just meditate enough or hack your dopamine pathways perfectly, you will never be angry again.
Which is impossible.
Totally impossible. The author rejects that completely. He embraces the cyclical nature of human failure.
Just be cool and take it one day at a time. I love that line. It strips the ego right out of the healing process.
It's very grounding.
And to completely ground this heavy psychological exploration, he ends with a highly relatable, slightly sarcastic vision of peace.
The European beach.
Yes. He talks about his ultimate goal, packing his life away and hitting the European beaches until he is utterly sick of blue water, sand, the sun, and women in bikinis.
Though he wryly admits he will never actually tire of that last one.
Of course. But it serves as a great psychological grounding technique.
It really does. After wading through the neurobiology of rage, the rigid expectations of Stoicism, and the terrifying autonomy of Jungian complexes.
He anchors the mind back to basic physical pleasure.
Exactly. It's a reminder that the goal of all this emotional regulation isn't to become a floating, ethereal monk.
Right. The goal of identifying your triggers and throwing the blanket on the floor is to clear away the psychological debris so that you can actually enjoy the tangible, beautiful things in the physical world.
You regulate the anger so you can actually feel the warmth of the sun.
The contrast is so deliberate. He begins the essay in the cold, isolated winter of 2020, surrounded by artificial Christmas music and deeply felt frustrations.
And he ends the essay visualizing the expansive, warm, sensory-rich environment of a Mediterranean beach.
He is actively directing his cognitive focus toward the environment that fundamentally opposes his internal stress.
It's a brilliant structural move.
Okay, let's quickly review the roadmap we've constructed from this essay today.
Good idea.
We started by dismantling the myth of emotional suppression. We acknowledge that we aren't Jedi and we aren't highly conditioned Stoic masters.
Right. We accept the biology.
We looked at the evolutionary biology of the amygdala hijack and why the physical adrenaline dump requires a physical metabolic clearance rather than just destructive venting.
The wood chopping.
Yes. Then we examined the terrifying but necessary vulnerability of auditing our own tectonic triggers, using self-love as the safety harness.
And we unpacked the sheer utility of cognitive diffusion.
Treating the complex, suffocating emotion of anger as a removable blanket, ensuring that we don't let our subconscious complexes dictate our reality.
The architecture he provides is incredibly robust because it relies on tangible actions rather than abstract willpower.
Absolutely. But before we close out this deep dive, I want to take the author's framework one step further.
Okay, let's do it.
We established that anger causes an adrenaline dump that makes us mighty wall mad, granting short-term physical strength.
Right.
We also established the metaphor of anger as a heavy, restrictive blanket covering our shoulders.
The cognitive diffusion.
Right. I want you to synthesize those two concepts for a second. What if, instead of viewing the blanket merely as a suffocating object that must be immediately discarded, you viewed it as a weighted training vest?
Oh, wow. A weighted vest. That changes the fundamental relationship to the resistance entirely.
How so?
Well, when you wear a weighted vest, you aren't a victim of gravity. You're actively utilizing gravity to induce hypertrophy. You're building muscle.
Exactly. When the subtle trigger is hit and you feel that heavy, restrictive weight drop onto your cognitive shoulders, the instinct is to panic.
To feel victimized by the emotion.
And to scramble to take it off as fast as possible. But what if you pause?
You accept the temporary weight.
Yes, you recognize the adrenaline coursing through your system, giving you that temporary cognitive and physical strength. And in that pause, you ask yourself, what specific emotional muscle is this trigger forcing me to build right now?
That is profound, because if the trigger is the insecurity of unemployment, the weighted vest is forcing you to build the muscle of intrinsic self-worth outside of capitalism.
Yes.
If the trigger is the grief of a lost pet, the vest is forcing you to build the muscle of processing injustice without succumbing to nihilism.
You don't have to wear the vest forever.
No, you still take it off.
You still take it off and throw it on the floor. But instead of the anger just being a nuisance that ruined your afternoon, it becomes the exact resistance training required to build your psychological resilience.
You aren't just surviving the trigger, you are utilizing it.
It transforms the narrative from one of passive suffering to one of active conditioning.
That is a brilliant way to look at it.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of the human mind.
It's been a great conversation.
It really has. For everyone listening, take these tools, identify your tectonic plates, practice the cognitive diffusion of the blanket.
And use that weighted vest to build something unbreakable.
Stay cool, take the failures one day at a time, and maybe start looking at flights to a beach somewhere. We'll see you next time.